Where do you think resistance to change sit in the body?
Well, I think a lot of it actually sits in your head. A lot of it sits in your head.
In your
And
head?
yeah, I'm a very left-brained, logical individual. Like, I'm a planner. I've always been left-brained. It could be because I that's kind of what I studied, like left brain types of topics and subjects. But you will find reasons to not move on. Like, you can definitely talk yourself out of things if you want to. Where I think it's harder to fool yourself is in what I guess what we were talking about is in your body. And this is not my specialty, but I think it's hard to trick yourself into feeling well, like physically. If you don't feel well, you don't feel well. But you can certainly logically create an argument as to why you shouldn't leave medical school, or you shouldn't move countries, or you shouldn't suddenly leap out of the corporate world without a clear idea of whether or not your self-employment is going to work out. Like, there logically, most of those things don't make much sense. So I'd say in general, the most logical thing to do is to stay on your current career path, regardless of whether you're happy or not. That's actually the most logical thing to do, is to not disrupt your life. So it can come internally. Sometimes the resistance can come from people around you. It could come. I oftentimes
Mhm.
hear that it comes from parents. I'm talking about like adults who are still thinking about what their parents will think if they change career paths. Their peer group, like industry peers, friends, people concerned about what people will think if they suddenly move on. How are people going to judge me if I suddenly go from this job to maybe being unemployed for a while, or maybe if I take a salary hit, how am I going to be perceived? So there's internal, there's social, there's societal norms that prevent us from stepping off the beaten path.
Which makes what you did very smart because you went on your own in solitude, not to be influenced by other people's
Yeah,
opinions.
yeah, I think it's
I find it very smart.
It's really important. There was a woman who came onto my show, Shada, just in November of last year, Sangeetha Gopalakrishnan, and she was working as an electrical engineer for Texas Instruments, and now she's a landscape artist. And one of the things that she told me was, and she's got an Indian background, so she fits the she stamped the card like, okay, I'm an engineer now, great. But she said that you've got to really find a way to get away from the noise and to listen to yourself instead of the opinions of others if you really want to do something that is right for you.
Yes. What you mentioned was very interesting. That sits in the head, the resistance, which actually led me to think about this following question, which is sometimes fear can appear as logic, right? So it might be fear that is creating these logical ideas in your head, forcing you and actually convincing you to stay in the path that you have chosen, that you have been put on. Um, but for you, what kind of a argument the fear was bringing up?
Well, the
Did you have fear? Could you tell at this point that it was fear for
oh
you?
yeah,
Or I'm not trying to put words. Was it
data.
fear?
Yeah, again, I remember
Okay.
these moments. I'd say probably the most fearful moment was, and it could have just been because I was younger and I hadn't really entertained the idea of ever stepping off the beaten path, was definitely when I left medical school. That was the scariest moment because, and I remember making the phone call to my mother. I was on this terrace at Georgetown that kind of overlooked parts of DC, and I was literally shaking, like, because I was telling her that I was thinking about leaving medical school. I was crying. I was literally shaking, and like my hands were shaking, and it was because I was so afraid of what leaving this behind was gonna mean for me, and I don't know, like, what my parents were gonna think of me, what I was gonna do financially. I come from a very blue collar background. I need to make money, need to earn a living in DC. It was really scary, and I remember I was signing the contract to the apartment I was gonna live in DuPont Circle, and when I was signing it, uh, I remember the solicitor who was there, who was at a firm called Press and Press, Morton Press, who's one of the solicitors there, Michelle Press in Washington, D.C. And he saw my hands shaking when I was signing the document because he actually said, "Are you okay? Like, is everything okay?" Because this all happened right after I decided to quit medical school, and
Mhm.
my my parents had helped me put a down payment on a condo in central DC, and I had to make a decision: do I want to stay in DC or should I just cancel this whole life here and figure something out? But I decided I would just stay there, and but he did. I do remember him saying like, "Hey, are you okay? Like, is everything like what's going on?" And it was because I was really afraid, and I didn't know what I was signing up for literally as I was signing the dotted line on that sales contract. So,
How did you survive in DC?
well, it was a pretty messy it was a pretty messy time Shada, for me. I like there's so many like that those 3 years in DC, so that was between 2002 and 2005. And that was when I was 24 to 27 years old. And it was kind of a mess, honestly. But I did on a very practical level, I actually went back to the National Institutes of Mental Health, told them what happened. They were kind enough to give me a temporary fellowship there just to help me cover my bills, but also I also helped them with some things at the Laboratory of Clinical Science there. And then I learned the first, I guess, tip that I now share with other people is just the power of networking. And I started reaching out to Northwestern alumni to let them know that I left and I was looking for advice on what to do instead. And there was a woman who was an alumni, Cheryl Austin Kasnoff at the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. And she responded and she told me she happened to be having lunch with a guy who had just started a health policy consulting firm in Washington, D.C. that was literally a block away from where I lived in DuPont Circle. And she said, I can hand your resume over to him if you can put one together. And I mean, I'd never really made a resume before. And so I did that and she put me in touch with him. I interviewed and that's where I worked the next 3 years. So that's how I survived financially and also professionally. And then that opened my eyes to the world of business. And I got involved with a corporate branding project, like a side project to rename the company. I loved that. And I kind of felt like I found my professional space in the world of branding. It just kind of happened. That's exactly how it happened. But it was a mess. Like, I mean, I was doing an EMT course because I thought, well, maybe I'll go back and do something different medical. I thought about resitting the medical examination, the medical school, the MCAT, the medical school examination, and trying to get into a different school because I originally wanted to go to UPenn, University of Pennsylvania. And I thought, well, maybe I just got into the wrong school. And if I went to another school, maybe that would work out. And that's a common thing that people do when they're thinking about leaving. They'll go through this mitigation phase. They'll try to fix it or come up with a different iteration of what they're doing. So I went through that mess. I mean, I taught salsa dance lessons at a Cuban club in in DC. So I kind of, yeah, I kind of like
Wow!
went through this renaissance of just trying to figure out what do I want to do with my life. And yeah,
Well, that's the beauty of it, no?
yeah,
That the chaos and the
yeah.
mess,
It was
that's
chaotic.
what life is about.
Yep.
What lessons do you carry from that moment into your today's life?
Well, first of all, that you really should pay attention to your feelings. I mean, again, I told you I'm a left brain person. I'm very logical. My father was a very logical left brain person, and I've always prided myself on being logical. But when it comes to your career, I actually think that it is very useful to pay attention to those whispers that you feel. And if you feel something's off, something's probably off. And you mentioned fear. There was a book I read many years ago called The Gift of Fear by Gavin de Becker. And he
Mhm.
talks about how fear can actually help protect us from things that are really dangerous. And so I think I was quite good at sort of shutting down my voice, my inner voice. But what's really important is to just pay attention to those whispers because if you don't pay attention to the whispers, eventually it'll start shouting inside. So just to listen to your inner voice is really important. The other thing I think that is really important is to uh, allow yourself to do things that you find energizing. And
Yes.
if you can do that, that's generally a good way to go in your career. If it's depleting, you may want to steer clear of it. And then the other thing
Yes.
to remember is to try to use your strengths, to realize you're not going to be good at everything. And I realized at that moment, okay, I did fine in undergraduate pre-medical studies, but this is a whole other level. I am not very good at memorizing these things, like all this terminology, all these body parts. I am really not very good at this. And uh, but I felt like I was decent at using my voice. I had done this brief stint at National Public Radio in Hawaii before I went to medical school, and I loved doing that. It was broadcast radio, and I loved that. And so I think I would pay attention to also the things that you may be doing on the side that really light you up, that you really enjoy. And that's generally how I would think about that. I mean, it's funny. I was just at my daughter's school this morning for Careers Week, and I spoke there, and they asked me to share just a little bit of advice with the kids. This was years grade 1 through 6, and so I said those exact same things: is try to do something that energizes you, try to leverage your strengths, and trust your feelings. This is exactly what I live by now, and this is what I recommend to people, and it's what I recommend to a bunch of 5 to 10-year-olds. Also, I think that's
Oh.
the way to go.
How do you distinguish between fear and intuition?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question, Shada, because you're getting to the blurry line between whether that fear is actually a warning sign that you're about to go into something, or maybe the fear is because you're so excited about this thing and deep down you know it's going to work, but you just have no idea how you're going to get there. And like, how do you differentiate between the two? And therein lies the challenge. I feel like sometimes you can't really solve it yourself, and this is where I do actually think that sometimes it is useful to talk with people about this, whether it's a trusted friend or ideally somebody who's not in your industry, but somebody who knows you well, and also somebody who maybe doesn't know you well. And I did a lot of that when I was leaving medical school. I did a lot of that when I was thinking about moving to the UK, and I also did a lot of that when I was thinking about leaving the corporate world. Is just talking to people, getting a sense of what you're getting yourself into, talking with your friends, can be incredibly illuminating because they will tell you, they may have actually been waiting to tell you and waiting for an opening to tell you, look, you got to get out of this. Like you haven't been saying anything positive about your job for the past 5 years. Like, I'm glad you're asking me because I think you should get out. So sometimes other people can see it. And if you give people an opening, they might take it and it can help you really clarify whether you're actually really afraid and you shouldn't do this because it's wrong, or actually you're afraid and that's just kind of par for the course, but that deep down you know this is right for you and it's aligned with what you care about, so you'll do it anyway. You'll do it anyway. And I think that those things that you really care deeply about are the things that you will fight for and that you won't let go of. So
That's
yeah.
so true. You said do something. I think that was amazing and very smart and actually very true. That what excites you is where you should go. That is your path.
Hmm.
What most energizes you and excites you. So, what if the things that excite you and energize you, they're not financially fulfilling, or well, at least at the earlier stages,
Hmm.
but you somehow have to make money in order to be able to pay your
Yep.
bills. So how do you balance? I'm sure you have gone through that,
Yeah,
right?
I've gone through
Have
that.
you?
And I am of two minds on this, Shada, and I haven't really come down hard on either side because I really do think it depends on the situation. But you will hear people out there, and I think a lot of people maybe in like the startup kind of hustle culture of, hey, if you love doing something, if you just work at it, the money will follow you. And I guess I understand where that sentiment comes from because I suppose if you're doing work that you enjoy, you're more likely to stick with it and you're more likely to do a better job at it. And so therefore, eventually people will pay you for it. So I do understand that. And that was my trajectory when I branched off to do career coaching and now speaking. Is I do feel like, okay, I did this, and I could do it well enough to where people would pay me for it. However, I also think that there is an important reality check, because I don't know if you've heard of this concept ikigai, but it's like a
Not
Japanese
sure.
concept where, in order to figure out your ikigai, sort of your home, not only in your work but also in your life, but they're focusing primarily on work. Is you want to think about what you're good at, you want to think about what the world needs, what you can get paid for, and what's the other? The fourth one is escaping me. Uh,
How do you spell it?
Ikigai. I I was just about
You cannot write it. Just
Igai.
spell it
Yeah,
for me, please.
Ikigai. Ikigai. Yeah. What you're good at, what you can be paid for, what the world needs. Oh, and what
Ah,
you love doing, what you enjoy doing. So it's
okay.
like what you love, what you're good at, what you can be paid for, and what the world needs. Because even if the world needs it, you may not be able to get paid for it. But often if the world needs it, you probably could get paid for it. And so I do think it is important to figure out those four things, is to try to figure, okay, what are you good at? Great. Okay. Um, what do you enjoy doing? That's also really important, because if you don't enjoy it, you're probably not going to stick with it. What could you get paid for? And also, like, what are you addressing some sort of a market need out there? Now, if you can't get paid for something, you got a problem, because well, unless you come from some like really wealthy, if you don't need the money, I guess that's different. But most of us do need the money. And so
Right.
I don't think people should entirely let go of their dreams per se, but I don't think it's a good place to be struggling to make ends meet. I think professionally, that's a hard place to sit, because your clients will probably sniff that out. So I think one way you can kind of hit a good middle ground here is perhaps you don't let go of that dream job and you're not making money. Maybe you're just doing it for free right now, but you have some other way of bringing in income to alleviate that. And on a very practical level, I did a little bit of that. I was hosting branding workshops when I first started this work. I didn't want to host branding workshops, but it was a way to get paid. And then that opened the doors to me eventually doing more speaking. And then it became more around personal branding, and then career changed workshops, and it kind of took off from there.